here is a lovely classic painting. And what I want you to do is squint at it, squint at the screen here, and just notice how much of this is dark. And there are places in this that are just velvety black. And because it's so black, that's what makes the light in this face glow. This face glows. And again, you really see that when you squint at the screen, right? If you squint at the screen, all of a sudden that face is glowing out of the darkness. And having a value range, so that is how far do you have from light to dark, is a wonderful way of getting your lights to glow and to sing. If you had that pale face without those darks around it, it would not feel as much of a bright, glowy face. As a matter of fact, just take your hand and cover up the hat. And notice that when you do that, the face is not as bright. But it's because that face is next to that dark. What makes that face bright is that there is dark hat next to it. Right? So we want to be able to, and you look around, many pieces of art that are kind of recognized, and many artists who are recognized as just being masters in their game. It is the darks that are in there that really make it glow. Really make it glow. Here you look at these white sheets and the face of the priest, and they're glowing. There's this warmth to them. There's this light in it. A big part of what makes that light is having these darks in there adjacent to them. So you want to have your light against darks. But also, let's take a look at the blacks that are in this. Let's take a look at the tunic of the priest, the botanist, nature journaling priest, might I add. All right, so here's this fellow sitting there, got the nature journal out, and is doing some studies of plants. You can see the plant specimen container hanging on the wall in the back of the room. So this fellow is all about the nature journaling. Let's look at the colors of the tunic there. What colors do you see in it? Look at the one on the bed. They're both black, but there is actually blue. That's a blue tunic on the right with, and we read it as black. We also read that piece of fabric on the end of the bed, perhaps the jacket there. We read the jacket as being black, and we look at it, and it's red-brown, right? So what is part of what's going on in this painting is that there are blacks, and the blacks are really going to some nice, rich, dark values. But you're also seeing that in the tunic and in the sheet, there's colors glowing back from those black areas, and that makes them visually much more interesting. If that was just dark grays, shades of grays, it would not be as exciting and vibrant. Even if you have 50 shades of gray in there, it's still not going to do it. It would just get weird, right? And so instead, we've got these blacks that have colors glowing out of them. Look at the darks here.
Who was the artist for the previous painting?
Oh, the artist for the previous painting is
priest.
I am blanking. So this one here, I think, is Sargent. I think we started with a Rembrandt, and then that last one, it'll come to me when I'm not trying.
Great.
So here, look at the darks in this. Look at those the dark. These fountains glow. The light in the foreground, you can just feel the warmth of this light. And in those, you have these. It feels like there's this warmth to it. In part of the fountains, you're seeing this orange color, this pinkish color coming in. Now, if you take pink or orange paint and you put it lightly on your piece of paper, you've just put something dark on that paper. So somehow the artist makes it feel like you can have these colors and have them feel really light and glowy, but it is and they feel bright. And the reason is because there's this dark background. And take a look around in the colors in that dark background. Squint your eyes, you're really going dark here, right? And then you open your eyes full again and you see that those areas are filled with color. And that's what's making those dark areas so dynamic and exciting. Squint your eyes at this. Those fish just jump off the page. Why does the fish feel so bright? Look at the shapes of those darks. Look at those darks. So having dark values, really dark values in your work is critical for this effective painting. If you only have, if your brights are not very bright, if your darks are not very dark, so if you don't have a big dark range, your drawings and paintings are not going to be as dynamic and exciting. But those fish glow because of all the darkness around them. Look at how dark those are. Oh, those fish just glow. Comic book artists know this very, very well. Comic book artists, a big part of their inking process is to punch in and carve those darks. And they put those in and it makes for very dynamic, very, very effective drawings that communicate their story really well. It's kind of fun to see over on the left-hand drawing the sketch that that inked drawing was based on. And you can see that the person who's just dropping in that sketch doesn't even want to be bothered with getting in there and filling in some real darks. They've just kind of got a medium shade of gray, and that is code for the person who's then going to be inking it, that here go all the way black. But it's so important that the two of them, the inker and the artist, have this specific code that means go all the way dark in this place. So our darks are important. They're critical to to how dynamically our picture reads. Here, Batman's shoulder and eyes really pop out. Those eyes are not the brightest, whitest thing on the page, but they really glow, and that's because of the darks that are adjacent to them. Thank you, Batman. Wyeth, right? Wonderful, wonderful painter, known for use of black darks and lights. Really loves to play with values. This painting is incredibly striking. And what it is, you squint at it, and just these, you've got these bold, bold shapes. And look at how dark those go. On the legs, you even lose part of where the legs is. That's called a lost and found edge, where your brain knows what's going on in those areas, in the scabbard, in the legs. The side of the pirate's body is lost into the shadow, but your brain knows where to put these things in. That's very effective use of those darks and lights. Look at the darks framing the face. That's on purpose. You want that face to stand out. Put some dark next to it, and those lights really light up. And hold on. So I'm going to stop my share here. And we are now going to jump to my document camera. And I'm going to show you how to get, first of all, I will show you my palette, what I use for darks and lights in that. And then we will take a look at mixing darks. So we'll take a look at darks and blacks, those sort of things. We're going to take also a look at how do we go about mixing those to play with our darks. And I am going to turn myself on to the spotlight view. Hey, everybody. You ready for this? We're going to get dark. There's my camera. I'm going to start with, maybe I'll start with colored pencils. I'm going to start with some colored pencils because it will be less messy. My colored pencil kits come with black pencils. All right. This is a polychromos pencil. It's black. And when I put down darks with this, oh, good idea. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. All right. So we've done this before. We go lightly with our colored pencil. We get a light gray. If I punch it in a little bit more, I get a darker gray. I'm now going to go in a different direction. When I change directions with my colored pencil, I'm able to add more colors on top of other colors. So if I always do in the same direction, I'm going to flatten the paper down in that axis, and that will limit the amount of pencil that I can build up there. I'm going to go in a different direction here. Press down a little bit more, and then a different direction. And we can build up, by changing our directions, I can get a very, very dark black. Again, when I'm getting my color in, I am changing the direction of my strokes. As I do that, I'm building up the value, and I get nice dark blacks. That's done with a black pencil. But let's say I want to get, I'm not going to use my black pencil, but let's say I want to get some color into these. So when I look at this, it's black, but that's just the end of the story. If I build up my blacks using other colors, I'm going to have a much more interesting and dynamic little pattern there. So what I'm going to do is, where's my, here we go. I've got a set of colored pencils here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick out of it several dark value colors. So if you squint at these, you'll see that some of them are darker than others. If I squint at these, I see some of them are darker than others. All right. So I've got here a purple, a green, a brown, and I've got a reddish brown there. I'm going to get one more wad of pencils here. Where are they? I am going to I'm missing one of my little, oh no, not, I was looking for these pencils. There it is. I'm going to get a blue in here too. Check out this. Anytime you are wanting to make there's going to be a bunch of ways to mix blacks with your pencils. So I'm going to turn on this little light here and see if we can see the color here. You can't see it very well. You'll have to take my word for it. It'll say it on the side of this. This is heliotrope, helio blue reddish. So this is a blue pencil. This one here is a brown pencil, right? That's it's a walnut brown pencil. Anytime you're thinking, gosh, how do you make blue? Just reach for some dark blue, some dark brown, and you'll get a gray and black. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put down some brown going in this direction. I'm going to put some blue down in this direction. And look what we built in the middle. Kaboom. How easy is that? So these are polychromos pencils. Yeah, so, and if it's not, you can also, you then add more on top of them. So this is, I've just got a dark blue, I've got a dark brown, I put them together and I can make a black. Now, some types of pencils give you less pigment in the pencil itself. So some pencils, you try to make a mark with them and they don't really get dark. They've got, if the whole thing feels pale and waxy when you're done, that's because probably your pencil is a really kind of very inexpensive pencils. It's mostly binder, the stuff that holds them together. But artist quality pencils, you can get, so I recommend polychromos pencils. That's what I've got here. Also Prismacolor pencils are great pencils. There's a few other brands of pencils, but very often the most inexpensive pencils really don't like to go dark. But just, anytime with all sorts of media, you're thinking like, how do you make a black? Just reach for a brown and a brown. Whoops, where's my brown? There's a brown. A brown and a blue, and you're going to get yourself a nice dark. And then you can play around with different browns and different blues. And that's a really easy way to go. But now let's have a little bit more fun with it. Because I'm going to put that brown aside. I'm going to take this green and this red, maybe some purple and some blue. What happens if I'm going to start here with this darkish reddish, and I'm going to put that down. And then I'm going to come across with some green. And there's some green. So we're getting darker there. We've mixed those complementary colors, that green and that reddish. All right, I'm going to throw a little bit more reddish in there on top of the green. And just look at how nice and dark that is getting. We still see a little bit of color kind of glowing up through it. But we're getting a really dark value. I'm going to throw in some blue on top of that. And we are getting somewhere. I'm going to throw in some of this dark purple. What else do I want in there? All right, just by piling dark things into there, you build up these colors. And there is a nice dark value. We're sharing colors over here. You can build up these really, really rich colors. And that is a wonderful way to do it. If you want to, you can throw in, oh, here's some black grape, my favorite. You can throw that into there. You can, so, just throw in a little bit of black grape and you are good to go. And look at that. So a bunch of different non-black colors. They also, all I did is I just reached for things that were dark in value, and there was no black in there. I didn't even put in the brown. And we built something that was really dark. And it's going to read as black. If you have something on your page that is where you put in black pencil and you want to add a little bit more life to it, you always can come across with a little bit of some other color and just put a hint of some glow of something else into it. And at some angles, you'll just pick up a little bit of color in those places. But generally speaking, these dynamic blacks that you've made by layering a bunch of different things on top of each other are going to be a lot more interesting and expressive. I'm just going to try this again. I'm going to try This is going to be a lighter value green, a lighter value purple. Here's a lighter value blue. And we'll just see what happens when these things mix together. So these are the, originally I had, you know, the darker value ones, and we got a black. So figure out what you think is going to happen when I go with just things, 3 pencils that are a little bit of a lighter value here. Let's start with this one. That's what I get there.
Jack, as you're doing this, there was a question whether the color ordering really matters if you start with green versus reds, whether you end up with a warmer or cooler shade of black.
I'm noticing a big difference in what I put on last. You often see a bit of that kind of coming through in a sheen. If I want something to tint towards green, I think I might start, maybe begin with that. But I don't have to, I don't have any formula that I use for doing that. I might, you know, if I wanted something that was, if it was on a magenta object, I could start with that magenta in there. But look at that really rich dark. It's feeling a little bit, what color? Maybe a little, Amelia says a little bit of blue in there, so I'm going to put in a little bit more magenta and a little bit more green. But these weren't super dark colors, but we get this nice dark mix when we put those together. It's a lot prettier than that. And what you'll get is just this little sparkle of these other colors bouncing back at you from that space. And that's nice. Mila, do you want to try with these guys? See what dark you can build up with those. So again, the go-to formula is to start, if you're just like, I need myself some gray, right? And it's not here in my palette. What's the darkest blue that I have and the darkest brown that I have? I'm going to put those together, and then you just sort of adjust the amount of blue, you adjust the amount of gray, and you're going to be in a happy place. But also realize just by putting together a bunch of different dark pencils, you can push and pull and tweak these things, be able to make some really lovely, lovely dark value spots. So that's all playing with colored pencil. Let's take a look at watercolor. So here is my palette. I'm going to back up from my palette a little bit. Back up. So here's my palette. And first thing I want you to notice about my palette is that I've got a zone here for warms, I've got a zone here for blues and purples, a zone for greens, zone for brown, zone for my grays and blacks. Some of these paints right down here on the end are blacks. This one at the very bottom here, that's my black. That's black paint. So you'll hear a bunch of people say, never use black. I never use black. It is some sort of watercolor sin. I've got black on my palette, and you notice it, if I kind of tilt this, it's used. So I'm doing that. And I'll show you when and where and why. Recently, I was looking at a black Phoebe. And that black Phoebe has black on it. That's got some black paint. Whoop. Little black Phoebe right there. So there's black paint on there. Sometimes you're outside, the mosquitoes are biting, and it's just really convenient to have that. Sometimes just being able to reach for that black, it's just going to be, I don't want to fuss around right now. Give me some black. But notice that these other darks around the Lawrence's Goldfinch here, there's all these different colors in them. So I can get really, more important than matching a color is matching matching the value. I wanted a really dark value back there, and I was able to get it. So I'm going to show you a little walk through some of my paints, and then we're going to mix some blacks here, and I'll show you what I use when I use it, why I use it, and how I use it. Let's zoom back out here just one more time. And so this right here in my palette, this is neutral tint. And neutral tint is black. Neutral tint is black. So if I get my water brush in here and I wiggle this around, high quality paints, when you take it off of here and onto your palette, you're going to find that you get really, really dark. Darks. Let's zoom down on this a little bit. Zooming. All right, so here we go. So I've got black paint here. A little bit of, I'm going to turn off this light and see if that takes care of that. No, we've got a little bit of reflection off the window. Those little spots that you see in there, that's reflection in some wet paint. So just ignore those. Right. So check this out. If I take this and I dilute it, what I get is gray. Right? So that's a gray color. Not very exciting, not very dynamic, but sometimes really, really handy. The next black that I have is Payne's gray. Some people say, I don't use blacks. Real artists don't use blacks. But I do use Payne's gray, which is basically black. Right? Oh, what a great difference. The deal with Payne's gray is that when you take your Payne's gray and you dilute it down a little bit, Payne's gray is has a bit more of a bluish tint to it, but essentially you're looking at a black, right? It's got a little bit more of a blue tint to it. So you never want, so it does cause problems if you're sort of mixing that into yellows, because it'll start to turn them a little bit green. Right. But yeah, Payne's gray, yeah, some people who don't use black, they'll use Payne's gray, but basically, let's face it, folks, we're using black. Yeah, a little bit of a blue tint. Another kind of black thing that I have on my palette, this third one right here is Black Tourmaline Genuine. Black Tourmaline Genuine is a ground up mineral, and it doesn't really go black. In full tone, it is a gray. What I really like about it is I dilute it, and it's this wonderful, warm, mousy, misty, foggy gray that is, it's a little bit more of a slightly brownish tint. So, but, you know, it is a straight out of the tube gray. I didn't mix that. I didn't mix that. I got those, and they're convenient. If I had to take one of these out, I would probably take out the Payne's gray. I've got then my straight up neutral tint black, and I've got my Black Tourmaline Genuine, which I find is it's really useful sometimes to have, like, you know, give me some matte gray color. I want that. You know, I used that. You can see that here on the Lawrence's Goldfinch. There's Black Tourmaline Genuine coming in here. I wanted just sort of a mid-tone gray thing and didn't want to be fussing around too much. Give me a little bit of gray with a slight brown, warm tint to it, and that's what I got. So those are straight out of the tube. I can mix these with things, but let's take a look at other things that you can do with, before we actually kind of get into mixing, let me just show you a few other paints that are extremely useful. Notice that these two blacks go to a very, very dark value. I want to have paint on my palette that goes really dark. If your paints don't go really dark, you're just out of luck. You want something really dark, you're not going to be able to get there. And really inexpensive colors, you often can't get them really dark unless you are kind of turning the little cake here into kind of a pasty mush. And then you're painting that over on your page with this thick paste, right? And it doesn't really feel like watercolor. But you can get things, you can like get the dark to be dark on it, but you're not really moving around liquid watercolor that's easy to control. You've had to create a thick, opaque paste. With higher quality watercolors, you just add a little bit of water to it, and you have it behaves like you would expect kind of a water medium to do. It's easier to use, easier to control, and you don't have to turn it into a thick paste. So that's one of the advantages of getting some higher quality paints. In this paint set, I have several colors that I know go really dark. Some colors on my palette, no matter what I do, no matter how thick the pigment, I know that it will never, ever really get dark. But others, I can count on them. So one of those, I'm going to show you just a few, here's a walk through a few of my favorite. Let's start with Untitled Blue. So on my palette in this location here, I have what looks kind of like this black spot here. I'm going to get some of that on my brush, and I'll bring it over here and let's see what it does. Look at that dark thing. That's Untitled Blue. And so I haven't had to turn it into a paste. It's still a liquid on my brush, but it is going all the way dark, bless its little heart. Right? And then if I take it and I dilute it out, you see that it is actually blue. It's a blue. So if any place in my painting that I want to push towards darks, where I kind of can have the blues in there, you know, the night skies, all these sorts of things, this Untitled Blue is great because it can go all the way from this, and it will go all the way to the darkest darkety dark, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, this one goes to 11, right? So another really useful color is Perylene Green. So next to that on my palette, so here's my, I know I've got my Untitled Blue, and right next to it is my Perylene Green. Got my Perylene Green over here. My Perylene Green, it behaves the same way. So just with a little bit of Perylene Green down, and you've got something that is black, it's dark. Deep, deep value. And then I dilute it, and it's green. It's this dark forest green. So that, because it goes all the way to dark, see if you can get that one all the way to mix a little bit more paint in it. See if you can get that one almost to like it's black, it's dark in there. You're doing a great job, Mia. All right, so here we go. Dark green, dark blue. I've got a few other colors up my sleeve. One is a dark purple. So on my palette in here, in this part of my palette, right next to my magenta, I actually have two purples. I have Windsor Violet and a naphthalide maroon here. I just have split the pan. There's actually a little plastic wall between these two. My Windsor Violet, also in Daniel Smith, it's Dioxazine Violet. I get that a little bit thick on my brush. And let's see what it does. Wow, it's almost to black again. And then we dilute it, and we're going out into purple. But without being turned into a thick paste, it can go all the way to that level of darkness. So these are three colors that will go all the way there. One last color that I want to show you, and if you look at my palette, you can see this is one that I really love. See how eaten out that little dish is? It's because I'm constantly reaching for Bloodstone Genuine. It's a Daniel Smith color. I get that on my brush. Again, I don't have to turn it into a thick paste. And I put that down on my page again. it's black. And then I dilute it, and you see it's this lovely chocolatey brown that will go all the way to my darkest value. So those are some choices that I have of things that will go to a really dark value. So anytime I want to have a dark value on my, have a good time in class, honey. Anytime I want to have a really dark value, I can reach for these. So let's just jump back to that little birdie, right? So in the background, there's a mix of Untitled Blue and some Perylene Green back there, and that gives me a dark background behind my bird. Because I knew I could just reach for those colors and I get something dark. I want to understand my palette and know that, oh, when I get that, I'm going to be able to go dark. I'm going to be able to go dark with a really, really dark value. And I haven't even mixed a color yet. But speaking of mixing colors, let's go there. The general strategy, as I said before, is you find a dark brown and you find a dark blue. And you mix those together, and yeah, you're gonna get a dark. So let's go see what happens if Untitled Blue meets Bloodstone Genuine. I'm going to add a little bit more Bloodstone Genuine into this to make that a little bit darker, a little bit more Untitled Blue in there to make it dark. And yeah, those go to a pretty dark right there. We knew they would, right? Because your two source colors go really dark. If I take this and dilute it out, you see that it has made, it's made a black. Right? So I dilute that. That's a wonderful sort of shade of gray. But the shade of gray has little bits of the blue in it, sometimes little bits of the brown, and it is more interesting. It's more visually interesting than this other thing that I had here, right? Let me dilute it a little bit more. Yeah, there it is. So I've now got it diluted so it's close in value. So we mixed that from the blue and the brown together, and they make a shade of gray. Can you do this if you don't have Bloodstone Genuine and Untitled Blue? Why, yes, you can. Let's do that now. So I'm going to look around here. Let's see what's another blue that we've got on this palette. We've got ultramarine blue, and we're going to throw in some raw umber or burnt umber. All right, let's try that. So here's another blue. This time, ultramarine blue. And I'm going to try some raw umber. Now we're going to meet those together and see what they build. If it feels a little bit too bluish, I mix in more of the brown. If it feels a little bit too brownish, I mix in more of the, I mix in more of the blue. But look at this sort of lovely shade of gray that we've made by mixing those two colors. So a good just sort of rule of thumb, if you don't have the black on your palette or you don't want to be using one of those other colors to make your dark there, you can mix your darks. I'm now going to put in a stronger patch of the blue in here. And look at how already that's looking black, because there's a bunch of brown in there already. Some more brown in that. So there's a black that we mixed from ultramarine and raw umber. How's that look on the side? You just get these kind of neat grays. And you can play with this. You can say, well, what happens if I have a slightly different color of blue or brown in there? I'm going to turn this upside down so I have more page. Oh, I think we have to go for actually a brand new page. Myself a little bit more. No, there's room here. Here we go. So I'm now going to do same blue again. And this time I'm going to change the brown to a different brown. And we'll just sort of see what kind of gray that makes. There's the same blue. It's ultramarine. And this time I'm going to get a reddish brown in there, right? This is burnt umber instead of raw umber. And we're going to mix that in. And we're going to see what they do together. Well, there it is. They made a nice little gray. Can we get those in higher concentration and make a black? Yep. A little bit more higher concentration of the blue in there. A little bit of a higher concentration black. And we just made black by ultramarine blue and a different one. The lighter the value, the original blue you're mixing in, the harder it is going to be. The harder it's going to be. But these work really well. I like the effect that you get with this sort of red-brown mixed with the blue. They start to just to sort of to play together in this dark. You can't really see it on your screen, but if you're here live, you would be able to see, just depending on how you tilt your head, just kind of a little bit of lively action in here. Some places you're going to see a bit of the more of the blue, some places a little bit more of the red-brown, but they're playing together and they're interacting nicely right there in that space. You can also just sort of take a mishmash of other fairly dark value things. I'm not going to use my big my four riders of the dark ellipse colors, because I know it might sort of feel a little bit like cheating. Of course, you can get dark values if you've got the Perylene Green, the Untitled Blue, the Windsor Violet, or the Bloodstone. But let me just sort of, we'll make a few more darks by mixing things together here. And see what we get. I'm going to start with a different blue this time. I'm going to give you some Cobalt Blue. So it's not originally as dark a value of blue as you can get with the ultramarine. So it's a little bit lighter. And I'm going to throw some, what do I do? I'm going to throw some olivey green into that. All right, I've got some oxide of chromium on my brush. I'm going to mix these together. All right, sort of made, now it's this sort of dark green spot. I'm going to go get a little bit of purple, some naphthalide maroon, and put that into there. Mix that in. Get nice and dark. And I see that out on the side. It's a little bit, I can see that maroon a little bit too much in it. So I'm going to get a little bit more green, a little bit more of that same blue. Balance that out, I'll test it out on the side. Oh, now it looks very green. So what I can do is, I'm going to get, well, let's try a little bit more maroon back into that. So you can go back and forth and change your, there we go. There is a little gray. So just taking generally dark value things, you can dogpile those in together. Here we just had to, it's a mix of several different kinds of colors, but you can get these sort of nice dark values coming back at you. Remember the go-to thing when you really need to, like if you wanted to just sort of mix a blue, I would grab a little bit of whatever darkest blue I have and brown, red brown, and I'm going to get a really rich mixed black. There still are times though when it's convenient to reach for some of your neutral tint. I mean, people call them convenience colors because they're, well, convenient. And that is playing with blacks. What I want to encourage you to do is to think of, in the objects that you are working with, the objects that you are drawing. You can play with these in several ways. Let's say I have some sort of an object on my piece of paper. And it's got some sort of a color to it. You can, if I want this to pop off my page, remember, this is pretty dark already, right? If I want it to feel light, what do I need to do? If I want this much color in it and still have it feel light, it needs to be in contrast with something else. So I'm going to put some dark next to it. And now, next to this, it feels dark. I mean, lighter. If I want it to feel even lighter, I darken that dark more. So the darker the dark, the lighter your light becomes. Another thing that you can do is to play with the idea of lost and found edges, where if part of the edge of your object is disappearing into that shadow, right? Your eye's going to sort of follow that around, and somewhere in there, it's going to have its edge, but you can't see exactly where that is. That's the lost and found edge. You can play with those on your subjects and sort of lose the edge of that, lose the edge of your object into that darkness. And the viewer will take care of the rest of it for you. What they're going to do is they're going to look at your object and they're going to go like, oh yeah, I know what's going on there. There's that object, and it's sort of disappearing into the darkness over there. They will fill it out for you. You don't need to, with your lines, do all the work for them. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit more interesting often if you let them do some of the work. Right? So I'm going to now lose more of this object in that shadow. How much is up to you. But that can make for very interesting, mysterious, cool looking things. Also, when you're out there looking at real critters in real life, you don't always see crisp edges on them. Sometimes you're going like, where's that back leg coming in? I can't really see because that elk is wearing a dark cape, right? So you can't see its back leg. So lose that edge, and you're just drawing what you see. And that will be a really kind of fun and powerful way of playing with those darks. So just to recap here, we took a look at several paintings and saw the impact. We want things to look bright and glowy. Well, then it's a good idea to have those darks in there. We looked at building up darks and blacks with not just with a black pencil, but by overlapping other colors. The general strategy, you can always grab a dark brown and a dark blue and something gray and is going to happen. But we also got that by mixing all sorts of other colors together and got these lovely things that sparkle back to you with different sort of, kernels of light. We looked at kinds of paints on a palette that you can use that allow you to really push something to dark. And then we started to mix our own blacks and grays. We started by mixing brown and blue. We saw several variations of that, and also saw that you can take a bunch of other colors of dark values, throw them together. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But in the end of the day, you can make your own grays by just sort of playing those together. And that is how we roll with, here we go, with blacks and grays. I hope that this was really useful for you. You got some good tricks and strategies for your own nature journaling. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, if anybody has other additional, I see Junie McKinley is got some suggestions for us, and that I'm just now starting to look at some of the chat and comments. Judy, would you mind popping on live here with me and sharing some thoughts, ideas? If you don't feel comfortable with it, don't feel any pressure about it. But I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. No, it's fun. Thank you so much, Jack. I'm just sorry that I'm blank, but my internet will just be too choppy if you see my face.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you so much. But I just threw in some, like you did. I've never seen the raw umber and the burnt umber. I just kind of nerded around myself. So, and that was gorgeous. And also, of course, burnt sienna and ultramarine. But I just love cobalt teal and Venetian red. For some reason, it's more of a gray black. And then I guess anything like Perylene maroon, I haven't explored that color, but for some reason I'm just super into it. So I think the Perylenes make a nice black, like the Perylene green that you used, right? And then so the Perylene maroon, I guess you'd match that with whatever, Viridian or any kind of green probably. And what was the other one? And then I know a lot of artists, I don't use alizarin, but whatever your alizarin is, if people do use it, and the Viridian, I think a lot of people use that. Even though the Viridian isn't that dark really, but.
Yeah, the one reason a lot of people have moved away from alizarin is that it's not really light fast.
Right.
And so you do your painting with it, you get your values right. If it sits in the sun for a while, that alizarin fades out, and the sort of the perfect gray that you had mixed all of a sudden is gone.
It's no longer. I've never really used it, but I know a lot of people got attached to it, right? Like I've never. Yeah. I just started painting, so I'm not. But there's it seems like a lot of palettes have some kind of alizarin. What do you call it? Permanent alizarin, like a mixture. So I'm just kind of nerding out because I'm making a palette, and I referenced you and Bruce McAvoy on Handbrit a lot, just to try to get a 10 palette thing that I could give to people here.
Yeah, tell people about Handprint, because that is the person on the planet of the Earth, on planet Earth, who's gone the deepest in really geeking out on studying pigments. Nobody I've seen has gone as far as what you see on Handprint. And so handprint.com. There's some very sort of strange rabbit holes you can go down on that website if you kind of start looking at other places. But
I just posted it, but people I just posted the link to the artist wheel, and I go down that rabbit hole all the time, but he also has things on like DNA and stuff. Like he's, yeah, quite the guy.
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
like,
quite a
sorry.
polymath.
You what? Sorry?
Quite a polymath. Just somebody with really kind of diverse interests. Really,
Yeah, yeah.
a lot of fun.
You like Jane Blundell too, right? I think
Jane Glendale.
Blundell, I think her name is, that has all the swatches and.
Oh, yes.
You can probably talk better about her than me.
No. Did you post a link?
No, I'll look for it while you're talking.
Okay, great. So those are really great resources. And notice what Judy did is she just talked about just messing around with stuff. Aha. See, that's the secret. You just mess around with stuff and you play with it. And you don't wait till you've got like the perfect sharp-shinned hawk drawn and now you want to make some dark. Mess around with it on some just give yourself some pages in your journal for simply messing around with paints, and good things will happen, and then you'll discover the way that your paints behave, and it's fun. It's really fun.